Welcome to SarderTV. I'm Vaishali Jain. We have the pleasure of having Seb Formoso with us today. Seb is Chief Information Officer with the New York City Department of Finance, a $36 billion agency that oversees tax and revenue laws for the city. Prior to this, Seb worked in the private sector for 20 years, and in his role today, he sees himself as a change agent, helping to transform the way residents interact with the government. Seb, thank you so much for joining us today. It's very nice to meet you.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you've been Chief Information Officer for the New York City Department of Finance for about a year now. Prior to this, you were in the private sector. You worked at companies like PepsiCo and IBM. Tell us why you decided to switch over to the public sector.
Over the last 20 years, I was lucky enough to work in IBM, and I worked with many customers. And I got to see the outsourcing business grow. I got to see the outsourcing business grow from practically nothing to a major in-industry. And over the last 5 or 6 years, that whole business has become very saturated in terms of its suppliers. So and what I did during that time is I learned a tremendous amount of things about how to manage vendors, how to successfully deploy projects, how to deal with cultural change. And I was in a situation where I was walking into customers, whether it was Pepsi, Philip Morris, PHH, and having to act as the change agent. Customers were bringing in IBM and someone like me to be able to change something. And over the last few years, I began to get the inkling to get on the other side of the desk. I didn't want to be the service provider anymore. I wanted to be the service consumer. I wanted to be the CIO and be able to leverage what I had learned in managing large contracts, managing large vendors, in order to be able to do that on behalf of a company and be very focused about enabling technology for a specific organization. So I began looking around to be able to go do that, and the opportunity came up to go to work for New York City, a huge brand, Department of Finance, another big brand, and frankly, to work in New York. I had spent a lot of time on the road. I always say that I got to know the TSA guards at LaGuardia, which is not a good thing. And coming and working in New York City, being able to go home for dinner, to me was incredible, right? That was something that I hadn't done in 10 years. So I took the opportunity, and I was incredibly pleased that someone with very little public sector background was given the opportunity to be a change agent for the Department of Finance IT organization.
So tell us more about your role as CIO for the Department of Finance and what you're responsible for.
So basically, I'm responsible for what we would call the application layer. I have the responsibility. We have a team of about 250 people, and we manage all the applications, the computer applications that support the property tax business, that support the parking collection business. We do a tremendous amount of work for the audit organization within the Department of Finance. We have a whole separate organization within New York City that provides us the data center services, the computers, the network. That's done centrally at an organization that we have in Brooklyn that provides all those services for all the agencies. My responsibility is very specific to providing the business-specific applications that the Department of Finance needs to do to fulfill their mission.
Tell us a little bit more about the Department of Finance. What is it that they are responsible for, and how do they help the citizens of the city?
So the Department of Finance has got a number of key functions. The ones that people would associate. So we're responsible for administering all of the property tax-related abatement programs or exemption programs. Therefore, we're also responsible for collecting all of the property taxes. We collect approximately, round numbers, about $27 to $30 billion annually in property taxes. So we're the ones who send you the bill, and we're the ones that collect those dollars and send them to the city treasury. And as part of that mission, we're also responsible to execute all of the programs associated with providing citizens any abatements or exceptions they may need for whatever reason they may need them, whether it's an exception for a disability or a veteran. So we execute all those programs. We also are responsible for, we have a large organization that deals with collecting all those funds. We execute payment plans. We have a large organization that deals with the auditing. So we also are responsible for collecting and managing the business taxes within New York City. It's about $6 billion in business taxes annually. That part of our business also has obviously a very large audit organization to ensure that people are compliant with the audit rules associated with business taxes. So we have that business. The sheriff also reports to the Department of Finance. Sheriff has got an organization of about 150 people, and they're responsible to execute a mission associated with making sure that we maintain all of the civil-related matters within the city. The police department handles all non-civil matters. Those are the key three main functions that Department of Finance performs on behalf of the city of New York.
Tell us how you're using some of the experience that you built over the last 20 years in the private sector to help benefit your work in the public sector at the New York City Department of Finance.
So I would say that one of my primary roles is to act as a change agent. So within the Department of Finance, we have systems that are, some of them are 20 years old, and we are in the process of changing them. It's important also to understand that we have a leader in Commissioner Jihad who is a visionary. The commissioner views every problem as something that can be solved with IT. So IT's role in solving and addressing specific business problems is something that's quite central to how we manage the Department of Finance. My responsibility is to act as a change agent, to enable the business to be able to leverage technology in ways that we may not have thought about, to refresh and to maintain the skills of the IT organization so that we can perform the first two missions of enabling and being basically consultants to the business. We wanted to change the approach and the culture of the organization from being order takers, which traditionally IT organizations become order takers, to becoming consultants. What can we talk to the business about to have them be able to do their business a little bit more efficiently and more effectively by leveraging technology? In the past, frankly, we've had a culture of having the business come with an order. We execute against that order, and we didn't always impose or express our opinions from an IT perspective as to what you might be able to do better and how you might be able to interrelate two separate efforts in order to achieve a better outcome for both. And so one of my objectives has been to drive that kind of cultural change in IT to make it a little bit easier for the business to get value.
Do you find that the bureaucracy that's kind of known to be part of the public sector is a hindrance to you implementing some of the projects that you've been trying to?
Yeah. So when I came into this opportunity, I was concerned about that. But I had not having worked in private sector and government, rather, I wasn't actually sure how that was going to work. What I have found is that within the Department of Finance, to my surprise, we are very quick and there's very little bureaucracy about making decisions. We have a problem, we identify a solution, we move on it. Now, there is bureaucracy in trying to staff up and finding the right skills or identifying the right business partner. The procurement process is something that we got to figure out how to make a bit quicker and improve its cycle time in order to support. But I have been incredibly pleasantly surprised at how rapidly we make decisions. And even as I was working with large companies, Fortune 500 companies, we spent a lot of time talking to CEOs, to board of directors about a specific decision. The pleasant surprise here is that we get into a room with the commissioner and his key decision makers, and we will make that decision within days. And that allows us to then move on very quickly to adjust our resources to try to attack the problem. So it has been a very pleasant surprise for me. A little bit too long than I wish in procuring services and help and consultants. Very quick about making decisions about deciding which way to go.
When it comes to hiring people with the right technology skills, do you find that it's difficult to do so?
Yes, it is difficult to find that, but it's difficult everywhere, right? It's not any less or any more difficult than it is here. In fact, in some ways, it's a little easier because we're in New York City. In my past experiences, I had people that, frankly, I had people that worked all over the world, right? So I had people that were located in Chennai, India. I had people that were located in Texas, and we were working in Philadelphia, and I never actually saw them, but we were able to work together very well. So I find it that we are restricted in terms of having to work with people who are physically in a location because of the nature of government, which is, I understand, and we deal with it. But New York City is a great market for people. So we're finding the right kinds of people that are out there. There are people that are interested in working in government. And what we do is, it's not a matter of looking for the right skill. Right, so I typically try not to focus, or I've learned over time, not to focus on hiring a specific skill, but hiring someone with aptitude, the ability to learn a skill, the ability to learn. So we'll look for people that may be proficient today at a specific skill, but the key is that they're able to learn a different skill, because 3, 4, 5 years from now, the fact is that the skill they have today will no longer be needed. We will have a different technology, and the ability to adapt. That to me is what I look for in people. How can they learn something new, even though they may not be proficient on the specific technical thing I need them to do today? And we are finding enough people in New York to be able to do that. I found no material difference between my ability to get skills in the private sector versus in the public sector. With the exception, as I said earlier, about have people work remotely. I mean, the best Windows guy that I know is in Dubuque, Iowa. I can't have him work in New York City from his basement in Dubuque, Iowa. So we have to make adjustments for the fact that everyone's got to be local.
Tell us why you think a skills gap does exist, though.
I think a skills gap exists because the nature of technology. I always have viewed technology as a wheel. And it's picking up speed. The rate of change is increasing. The things that we do today with technology, we did not envision 5 years ago. The things that are going to happen, right? So recently I was in a Gartner meeting where we talked about big data. The children who are in kindergarten today, I learned at this Gartner meeting, will be doing jobs when they graduate from college that we haven't envisioned yet. So the nature of work is changing. As the nature of work and as the nature of what we can do with technology changes very rapidly, our ability as human beings, and we like to stay in a specific group as human beings, human nature, it's difficult for us to be able to maintain a rigorous learning schedule to be able to keep up with the amount of technology changes going on around us. People who are able to do that are going to be very successful, but most of us have to struggle every day to make sure that every day we focus on a little bit of learning. Right? And as that wheel of technology speeds up over the next 20 years, this will become a greater and greater problem.
What can be changed in our education system to address this? Because it is going to be important in order for organizations just to stay competitive and to staff up right. So what can we do?
So one of the things that, and I'm by far no expert on this area, but what I look for the education, so as I was looking for a school for my daughter, I wasn't looking for a school that would teach her a specific subject. I focused on a place where she would learn to learn. How can we teach our children to be able to learn how to do homework and not how to do math, right? How do we teach the skill of learning so that through grammar school, through middle school, through high school, we teach students how to learn. Going back on my theme about learning that skill is very powerful, because the students that we see today in school are going to be able to get information and skills and education from their computer, from their telephone. They're not going to have to, be in a building to learn. That paradigm will shift. And as that shifts, if they have the skill to be able to assimilate knowledge and turn that into a skill from some device, that skill of learning that will be the power. To the extent that we can have our education system begin to move away from what we teach, which is specific subject matter, which is important, but to be able to teach a skill of learning, right? I always notice that the kids who do really well in school are not the kids who know the subject, but the kids who know how to study. How do we teach all kids that?
We know that technology is changing more rapidly than laws are. So how does a public agency like the New York City Department of Finance keep up? How do they stay innovative to sort of match the realities of what the citizens want?
Right. Well, so the first thing is to begin to modernize all our systems. So our systems have done a terrific job of supporting the city. They run like Swiss watches. They're very, very solid, but they've been built on technology that's over 20 years old, which is frankly just not flexible enough for the kind of things we have today. So one of the questions that I asked the commissioner when I took over was, why are we making all these changes? Because we're about to make massive changes to the underlying technology that runs this whole organization, and change at some point is going to be painful. And the answer that came back was exactly what the answer to your question, which was, We need to be able to have systems that allow us to be very flexible, because today the systems are preventing us from making policy changes that would benefit the citizens, because it would take us too long to change the underlying systems that execute those policies. It's actually fairly easy to achieve, because the systems that we have today given that they're 20 years old, we're running on technology that are basically flat files from a technology perspective. I mean, we're running, very, very old technology. Just the fact that we're upgrading to modern databases, modern relational databases, which allow us to make many-to-many connections in our systems, is going to be able to give us the ability to change the systems very quickly. So the flexibility of the technology that we're implementing allows us to make that kind of a change. Now, if we have a major, right, so if we have a major policy change, a new tax form is released for a new type of tax. That typically will take us a number of weeks to implement. But the systems are highly flexible, and we're able to leverage subject matter experts in order to make them do things that in the past we could not do.
So you're doing several things using technology to help improve things and make things easier for citizens. And one of your accomplishments is overhauling a 25-year-old computer system for business taxes. What kinds of improvements did you make to the system?
So what we began is we currently in the process of changing out our business tax system, which collects about $6 billion. We completed the first major implementation of that this past January 19th of this year. We're going to complete the second phase of that on January 6th of 2017. So that's a major project that's going to impact how we support the business tax people who are filing business tax in New York City. We're going to give them the ability to talk to us via the internet through e-services. They'll be able to see their accounts, pay their bills, file their things that they weren't, that in the past were paper processes, we're converting to electronic processes. And a set of multiple applications that we're doing this. So we took multiple things that grew up independently and basically replaced them with one central system. The other thing that is very important that we're doing is we coded and programmed our legacy systems, terrific set of systems. The new systems that we are putting in place are going to be based on configuration. Basically, we're buying packages that allow us to change the configuration. So in the past, if you wanted to make a policy change, you had to have a meeting with a programmer, and he would have to have a conversation with someone about writing code, and that code would have to be tested, and so on and so forth, through a fairly rigorous life cycle that you want to go through in order to maintain stability of these very critical systems. In the future, what we're doing, and we're already seeing it with the business tax system, is we're actually moving that to the business. So now the business is going to have the ability, through their more senior subject matter experts, to be able to change the system through configuration settings. We don't have to have a meeting with IT to talk about programmers doing what programmers do. That we're eliminating that. We're moving to your basic package where we can, which have tremendous flexibility and allow the end user, the subject matter expert, that super user, to change how they want to do business tomorrow. So in the past, if we wanted to make a change to one of our systems, we typically would be able to make a change for policy reasons twice a year. If we were very efficient, maybe 4 times a year. And since we implemented, not that we're going to be able to do this all the time, but since we've implemented the new business tax system, we are making approximately 12 to 18 changes per week. Every Thursday at 5 o'clock, we roll out a new system. By noon on Thursday, the users test. If they finish testing, we deploy at 5. That was unheard of. So our speed to market in order to be able to give the users what they want, to give the customers what they want, has dramatically increased. We're looking to do the same thing within the property tax system. We don't expect it to be weekly. That system is dramatically larger, dramatically more complex, and we need to make sure that we manage risk correctly. But we are looking to be able to implement changes on a regular basis. We're yet to figure out whether that's going to be monthly or quarterly, but we are, again, looking to have a regularly scheduled program where we can deploy a new platform to the users on a regular basis, and they can begin to see some of the changes they want.
All cities have to collect property tax and make property assessments, which can often be complicated. The city of New York also had a rather complicated method for assessing property. So tell us more about that, and what you've done to build a new system to help make it easier for the citizens.
We're going to be doing the same thing for the property taxes. We're expecting to go live with our new property tax system in the summer of 2017. This has been going on for a couple of years, massive project. We're focusing our attention on how we're going to test this system, given how important it is to New York City, and how do we make it transparent to the citizens of New York who receive these statements of account and pay their taxes on a regular basis. So lots of work going on there, lots of organizational change management work. How are we going to change how we do work, given the new capabilities that we have with these systems that did not exist in the past? How are we going to organize our teams to be able to process work? As a result of those systems, we're going to be again, e-services will be a major piece, where we're going to be able to put websites in place that will allow the citizens to be able to see their bills. We're going to increase that capability. But we're doing a lot of things internally. So workflow is a relatively, not a new concept in the industry, but a new concept given our technology. Given that our technology was 20 years old, it did not have the capability for us to be able to do workflow. With the new systems, we're going to be able to see backlogs. We're going to be able to see queues. We're going to be able to know that we may have too many of one type of tax form coming in, sitting in a queue, and we need to add more people to that queue in order to be able to address that queue and eliminate the backlog. So one of the ways that we're going to be able to help the citizens is by implementing workflow with new technology. We'll be able to monitor and address queuing problems that we have in our own internal processes, something that in the past we just didn't have the ability to do. So there is a number of efforts. The systems are going to enable transparency. The systems are going to enable the property owners to log on and see information about their property that they may not have yet seen. We've actually implemented a system, we implemented a tax map system a few months ago, where we're providing that transparency to the citizens in terms of what are the taxes relative to their property, of their neighborhood, of their zip code, of the people who are closest to a specific subway station. We wanted to provide that transparency in everything we do. And we're also working with, across the agency, not necessarily an IT project, but we're looking and working with some consulting firms who are helping us look at the paper we produce, the electronic forms we send out, the emails we send out, to give us some advice and counsel as to how do we make these forms, these documents, as user-friendly as possible. Right? These forms have grown up over the last 20 years, and there's been many layers of complexity has been added to them for good reason when they were added. But now we're taking a fresh look and saying, okay, how do we, the information is online. If you need the information, you're going to be able to have it and get it quickly. How do we make the form be as friendly as possible, and how do we simplify that? And while the form may have actually less information, how do we create transparency so that when you look at the form, you actually understand what it's saying, and you take the initiative to go deeper and look online for more information about your property? Because today you may look at the form and this is so complex, I really don't want to go any further. So we're thinking through that, the art of how to make something that we provide the citizen as useful to them as possible.
You've also deployed a property tax calculator and a portal for landlords, right?
Yes.
Tell us more about those.
Property tax calculator allows people with specific property types to be able to calculate their taxes. You know, that project was deployed fairly quickly. We deployed about 6 weeks ago, and that's working very well. And the landlord portal, we were having an issue where in order to provide exceptions to specific renters, we needed a copy of their leases. And the physical copy of a lease was a very difficult document to be able to mail, transmit, transport, send to us. So we created a portal where the landlords, who are very interested and motivated to be able to provide this, because they get some benefit as well, provide us these leases electronically. So now we're able to get this information in an electronic fashion. Our exceptions process is able to see it, not have to go through a mail folder or, and be able to look at hundreds of pages, but they're able to see these documents and process whatever the exception may be for that particular renter very quickly. We piloted with a small number of landlords. We're now expanding that by working with various landlord groups to be able to expand that to as many of the landlords as possible.
Now, what about citizens who are aging, who are maybe older, who aren't as familiar with using technology? How is this going to impact them?
So I think of my mother. who is not going to use her phone. Her flip phone doesn't have the mobile capability to be able to fill out a form, and it won't. And she's going to be continuing to go to her family to do that. We're not eliminating paper, right? I mean, there are many, many reasons why that's not going to be eliminated. What we're trying to do is, as we roll out the systems, we expect that some percentage of citizens will always use paper for good reasons. But what we are trying to figure out is, how do we take that paper, and as opposed to putting it through the traditional process, how are we going to create teams that can take that paper and ingest it into our system very quickly, so we will perform the data entry on behalf of the citizen? How do we do that internally so that that paper form can be processed with the same cycle time as an electronic form? We've been very careful about thinking about, so are we giving all the advantage in terms of speed to those who file electronically? And are we going to disadvantage anyone who files on paper? And so we're thinking through that, how are we going to even out the playing field? So when my mom files her exemption on paper, she gets the same speed in terms of throughput as someone who used e-filing. Obviously, we want to have as many people use electronics as we can, but we see that there's going to always be a need to do that, and we need to think through that very carefully as we deal with the paper that will remain behind for good reason.
So is this saving the city time and money as well?
We're definitely saving time, and we expect to see fairly good dollar savings, but our focus has been on time. And one of the other things that I don't want to mitigate, and we haven't talked about, is risk management. So we have an aging population in the city and in the state. And these folks have a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge, but they also have earned a very, very nice retirement package that they will take very soon. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is to make sure that as a result of this project, we begin to understand how these systems work. How do we take that institutional knowledge and document it? And any large system cutover project like what we're doing forces you to do that, so that now we can have written down processes and we can have that institutional knowledge on paper, so that when people take advantage of the retirements they've earned and have a right to take, we're not in a dire situation if we miss the wrong, if we have a single point of failure. So we've been very focused not only on how do we make the systems more efficient for the citizens and for the business, but also how do we capture the business processes that have been over time coded into the application and not written anywhere. And this effort has forced us to write everything down, which has been very positive.
You've worked on several projects. You're going to be working on many more projects. Tell us about some of the challenges that you faced, be it internally, externally, while you've worked on these projects.
Every project has challenges, right? So, there's always time constraints, skill gaps, skill issues. We have one expert who, we need him in 5 projects and he's not available. We have the same typical issues that anyone who's doing complex project management and program management is having. The thing that I focused on, and the thing that always worries me, is cultural change. When you have a process that's been running for years, and people have been doing that process very, very efficiently for years, and you want to change that process, and you want to integrate that process, or you want to be able to make the process so that it will change itself on a monthly basis, because now we have flexibility, that requires material cultural change. So cultural change is something that as I go into every meeting, I always put my lens on, okay, what cultural change are we talking about here? Is this a leadership issue? Is this an education issue? Who's going to feel threatened by this, that needs to be made comfortable? Where will be the frictional cost that is going to come from passive resistance versus active resistance? Those are the issues that I always focus on. Those are the things that I've seen over my career have been the things that, if you don't plan for them correctly, will cause you problems. Even though the code may be perfect and the test may be 100% successful, you have to prepare for cultural change. So one of the things that I tend to do, and I try to do, is plan for cultural change in the same way that I plan for coding, in the same way that I plan for testing, in the same way that we plan for training. It's an active work stream with measurable outcomes as to how are we going to implement the cultural change needed, and identifying the champions, identifying what I call the super users who are going to help us do that. That is the thing that I'll focus on. The other issues that you have in program management, we have. We're no different than anyone else. We have those issues, we deal with them through management and cadence and status and governance. But cultural change is something that I always look for. If you don't plan for it, it will eventually have a problem.
Tell us what the culture was like when you first got to the Department of Finance, and what are some of the changes that you're looking to make to its culture?
So one of the reasons that I joined New York City Department of Finance was that as I went through the interview process and I met the leadership, there was a tremendous propensity for change. So the leadership of the organization, the key leaders, drive technology. So I have not had a problem getting the IT agenda into the organization. That, in fact, if we have a problem, which is a good problem, IT is everywhere, right? Every problem is solved by IT. That's the best part of the Department of Finance, and that's the worst part, right? It's a double-edged sword because we are in the middle of everything. Someone the other day told me that we're the spine of the organization because we have a set of leaders that see technology as the way to solve the current problems that we're dealing with. So we don't have a problem of getting buy-in. Our problem is to be able to keep up. How do we keep up? How do we prioritize? How do we change priorities quickly depending on which are our biggest problems, depending on what's going on? And how do we do that at the same time that we insert into the infrastructure security, make it very secure, and stable and resilient. Resiliency, stability, security, build that in. But by the way, those are table stakes. That's what my bosses expect. On top of that, build me the application capability that sits on that platform. So balancing those things is something that we work on every day.
Tell us what kind of culture you're trying to build at the New York City Department of Finance.
The one thing that we're working to change internally as we look within our own IT organization, the Information Technology Group, we need to become more agile. Mm-hmm. And so we need to adopt some techniques to make us more agile. So we just completed our first agile project where we deployed an amnesty website, which we did very, very quickly. Great success for us. Doing that, not once, but doing that 6, 7, 8 times a year is something that we need to figure out how to do within IT. I think that at times we still come to the table and think of ourselves as programmers, as opposed to thinking of ourselves as IT consultants who may or may not use programming to solve a problem. That's a key cultural change. And we have to be delicate on how you do that, because cultural change is not necessarily forcing that. The people who are running the organization today have been running it for years, have done a terrific job, and they have institutional knowledge that we cannot afford to lose. So how do we get those critical resources with that level of institutional knowledge to adopt these cultural changes and begin not to think of themselves as programmers, but think of themselves as consultants to the organization? We work on that one by one by one. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of mentoring going on, formal or informal. But in order to be able to do that, you have to talk to people. You have to get them comfortable. You don't do that in a group setting. So I spent a lot of time with individuals talking about this and seeing how they fit into what they want to do and putting them in the place where they can be successful.
Anything else that you learned in the private sector about culture that you're hoping to apply?
One of the things that I learned in the private sector early on is that every organization mirrors its leader. When I was at a customer where the customer was late for every meeting, I was late for every meeting. When I was at a customer where punctuality was important, I was very punctual. So I learned that you have to lead by example. You can stand up in front of people and tell them what to do, but they will do as you do. And so leading by example is important, and leading by example takes a long time. Change doesn't happen, quickly. What I always say to people, it took us many, many years to get the way we are. It's going to take us some number of years to be different. Human nature and the way that we change is always slow, but you work on it every day. I learned to take risks. One of the things that I tend to do is, I always say to people, I make 10 decisions a day. 7 of them are good, 3 of them are bad, and that's good. Because to me, it's about moving forward. We need to decide, make a decision, move forward and adjust, which means that I also admit mistakes very quickly. Knowing that I make 3 mistakes a day, I'm very, very quick to say that was a mistake, adjust, we change tomorrow. So I'm a big believer in make a decision, move forward and adjust. Don't overanalyze everything to avoid the risk. The other thing that I learned over time is to trust my instincts, frankly. We all develop instincts over time, all of us. And I am amazed at when I work with people in my organization who have terrific instincts, but they don't trust that they're making the right decision. And when I ask them about, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to do this. Well, that's perfect. That's what we should do. Well, I wasn't. And what I always say to my staff is trust your instincts. You have good instincts. That's one of the things I look for people with good instincts that can make quick decisions. So trust them and move forward. We'll get through this. Let's just keep moving. And the other thing I took away from private sector over many, many years was that, I always had this view that those above me, that the guys who were running the company were somehow more intelligent or somehow had something that I didn't have. And the more and more and more time I spent working in the private sector, what I learned was that they're actually not more intelligent, they're just better read. They have more time to read and learn. That learning was the key, that they were able to absorb new techniques and new methodologies and new approaches and apply them to a problem, where I was buried at some level where I was spinning and wasn't able to pull back from the treadmill to be able to apply a new learning. So I was lucky enough to have that learning early on when I worked as an executive assistant to a fairly high-level person, and I could see what it was like to be in the boardroom. And I remember that day very well, where I was, wow, these guys are not actually any smarter than I am. They just have more time to apply what they learned. And I took that to heart, to try to pull back and try to adjust. I always think through, every couple of years what I've been doing, and I think about, what adjustments do I need to make? What have I not adjusted to? So those are some of the many lessons that I've taken away.
You talked a little bit about leaders. How would you describe your own leadership style? And give us an example.
So I tend to manage by walking around. I want to know what everybody's doing. I like flat organizations. Right? I will, sometimes to my staff's dismay, I will reach around the entire staff and go to the programmer. I want to know what's going on. I need to know the details on many things. I don't micromanage, but I will delegate everything. I'm a big believer that you need to delegate everything. But I want to know who's doing what. I'm always concerned about getting status and having it be filtered by multiple layers of management. I want to talk to the people who are doing the work. I want to know at the factory floor what is going on, because that gives me a sense of the risk that we are carrying or not carrying, and I want to get that in a very, very crisp way without it having to be filtered by anyone. I'm a big believer in allowing people to succeed and fail. I've seen too many organizations where the minute we have someone who may be weak, we do everything we can to make sure that they don't ever fail, and we basically do their job for them. I learned early on that that's not good. We need to allow people to succeed and fail. People don't want to fail. People will not fail if you let them succeed and fail. They will figure out how to succeed all the time. And by propping them up, you're actually hurting them, which means that I have to accept that every once in a while, my staff will fail, and I have to fly cover for them. I have to protect them, right? It's on me to make sure that they know that they fail, but I need to make sure that folks above me don't do anything to make sure that that individual, because then if I don't protect them, then the learning that they will get from that failure will not be applied by them. So one of my responsibilities is to protect my staff, allow them to succeed and fail, and make sure that they're exposed to everyone when they succeed, but protect them when they fail so they can learn from it and move on. And I'm a big believer in small teams. I think that the best projects are done with small, eclectic set of teams that have lots of different skills. I read hundreds of emails and I send hundreds of emails every day. I'm a big believer that you have to over-communicate to people. You can't over-communicate. Now that could be a big frustrator if you work in my organization, because you're going to hear about the status of my project more than you want to. But in that status, there is a theme. There is a theme about what the priority is. And if we're shifting, right, and there's so many times in a project there are subtle shifts, very subtle, that are not easy to communicate unless you over-communicate. So the subtlety of the shift that you're making and the directional change you're taking is understood by sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds of people who are in the middle of a project. We have our project, our property tax system is a huge project. We have hundreds of people working on it. It's important that on a weekly basis we communicate what we're trying to do. And I would say that right now we probably need to do even better. I am not satisfied that we are communicating correctly on a consistent basis on these major projects. I never feel comfortable about that. I always feel that there's something else that we need to tell everyone, right? To get that, I tend to use the word alignment a lot. I believe in alignment on multiple levels, and alignment is something you work on every day, because the fact is that the business changes every day, priorities change every day, the way we all feel every day, there's pressures on us every day, so you need to always work at maintaining alignment. And the other term I tend to use is we need to make that part of the fabric of what we do every day. If you're working at alignment as a separate work stream, something's wrong. Alignment has to be in the fabric of all the other work streams. That's a very critical, and it works sometimes. Sometimes it's harder to do than others, but those are the key, I think, the key strengths of my management style.
How are you making use of the fact that so many people are using tablets and smartphones to get things done now?
First of all, we just finished implementing a brand new Department of Finance website, which is mobile ready, mobile compatible. And we are in the process right now of inventorying every one of our websites, which have been built over time, some of them actually running off of mainframes, to make them compatible. Our view is everything that we do has to be tablet or not even tablet, mobile phone compatible. Our view, or my view has been, and what I've learned is that not everyone is able to afford to have a laptop at home. But most people are able to afford a phone. So we have to be able to have the citizens be able to do business with us on a phone. That is the lowest common denominator. And by definition then do business with us on every other technology, a tablet, a laptop, and whatever else up the line. We're inventorying everything. Our business tax system was able to do business on a phone, but we didn't like the way it was kind of clunky. On January 9th of next year, we're going to get a new look and feel, and it'll be very mobile compatible, so you'll be able to look at your business taxes. If you're a business owner in this business, you'll be able to look at your taxes online. You'll be able to pay your taxes online. You'll be able to perform all your interactions related to your business taxes with us on your phone, if you so wish. Obviously, a larger company is going to want to use a larger device, but that's what we were thinking, right? That individual who owns a pizzeria and wants to deal with their taxes on the phone should be able to do so. We're doing the same thing on the property taxes. We're working right now looking at how we're going to set up our e-filing, e-services model so that it not only works correctly on a laptop, but it also works correctly on a phone. And one of the things that we've been working on is not only to make our parking systems be able to be mobile compatible, be able to work correctly on phones, but we're also working to create a mobile application that you'll be able to go to the Apple Store, download this application. So if you want to pay and adjudicate your parking ticket on an application, you'll be able to do so. So we're very excited about that. We're going to be deploying that in March. So we'll be able to have that out. But this is an example of where we don't view that originally we viewed that it was viewed as a project. Here's a project, we need to go do this. Now it's part of the fabric. If you're touching a system, if you're opening up a system, then you need to make sure that when you open up that system to provide some whatever functionality the business needs, you also make it mobile compatible. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, we need to have a conversation about that. That's got to be a conscious decision. Why aren't we doing that? Time, money, the system is going to be sunset relatively soon, so we don't want to invest in it. What are the reasons that you would not do that? So that we track that and understand what's going on relative to all of those.
Tell us about some other projects that you have in the pipeline.
So I told you about the parking adjudication application. We're actually pretty excited about that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we're looking at is one of the big businesses that we do is we run the lands record department. So if you have a deed, you come to one of our centers and you register that deed for a sale. Today, you bring paper to us. And we create some forms and we type some information. Who's the owner? What is the address? Well, which address would this owner or management company like to be communicated to if it's not the address of the property? That's all done manually. The underlying application that we have for this is a terrific piece of technology. We need to enhance it. We need to add to it optical character recognition so that we can take your deed, and today we take that deed and we have all of them online, but we have them as pictures. We need to be able to extract from that deed the data elements and put those data elements in our database with a lower rate of, frankly, key punch errors. And as we do that, we need to look at patterns of that data so that we can eliminate a little problem, or a rather large problem that I have. I shouldn't be humorous. So we have a deed fraud problem. And we need to look for patterns in this data to be able to prevent deed fraud. So this is a major effort that we are just kicking off. We are beginning to work with a couple of companies to determine how we're going to move forward and which company we're going to partner with in order to be able to enhance our land records management system. The other thing that we're looking at is we have a tremendous amount of backroom information about parking tickets. And I've learned a lot about parking tickets as I've been in this job. Parking tickets are not just an individual like myself getting a parking ticket, but there are fleet companies and there are brokers and there's a whole set of customers. We're trying to understand how we can modernize all of the systems that support that business and get ready for what's going to be going on in the Department of Transportation, where they're going to be having their own mobile application where you're going to be able to pay for parking on a telephone. How are we going to interface with that? So we're looking at that whole back end of information about parking tickets and how we can make that more flexible and available to the public and available to us. And we've also just, in the last couple of months, so as you can well imagine, in an organization like ours, we have many, many different data warehouses, data marts, data files. We kicked off a project to be able to aggregate all that information and try to figure out how we're going to mine this information. So we're building a data warehouse. We're spending a lot of time on data governance. And we're also beginning to look at things like blockchain. So going back on my example about registering a deed for a sale of a land record sale, one of the ways that we're trying to figure out is, can we apply some form of blockchain to all of the identities associated with that process to also help us eliminate deed fraud? So we're hoping to figure out how to pilot that over the next few months and decide how we're going to try to leverage that. We've seen some examples of blockchain that, while blockchain is not yet really a mature technology, there's some examples of it that we think might be able to be mature enough to apply to this problem based on some things that we saw going on in Europe. So we're trying to understand what that's going on there. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the things that are going on, but it's a full play. We're not bored.
So of the technologies that you have deployed so far, how are the citizens of the city responding to it? How are they using the technology? Are you finding that it's been successful?
Yeah. So the business tax system has been a success. It was a very smooth deployment. We were very careful. We implemented hypercare to make sure that we could get through the cutover period very easily. And we were able to successfully get through the cutover period without any impact to the citizens. We're seeing increase in the usage of the e-services, the filing capability the system has. We're seeing people leverage that data, and we're creating transparency. Because we now have an integrated system, we're able to achieve a higher level of transparency than we did in the past. I think that next year, as we roll out property tax system, as we roll out the second phase of our business tax system, as we begin to do some things that we haven't even thought about yet with our data warehouse, we're going to take this to the next level and really begin to see how we can leverage this data on behalf of the citizens. The key question that we need to think about is, how are we going to make this available to them? How are we going to make it available to them in such a way that would be resilient and stable and useful? Right? Too much information is noise. So how we're going to convert all this data to information is something that we are still beginning to think about. Lots of data, but where's the information? Where are the key synergized data points that we can actually associate value with? That's something that will be coming.
How do you determine whether a project has been successful or not? How do you assess?
No impact to the citizens is number one, right? So we got to be able to be transparent in terms of implementing systems. The other thing that we do is your basic traditional governance process. We look at our objectives, so we achieved our objectives based on whatever the objectives were for a public sector project. But I measure success based on primarily two things. Did we do what we said we were going to do on the date that we said that we were going to do it? And did we do it without any impact on the citizens? We get no telephone calls. Those are the three things. And the last one, the no impact on the citizens, carries a lot more weight. We will move a date if we think we're going to impact the citizens. I'm a big believer in making dates. Set dates make the date. We can adjust scope, but make the date. We need to have a culture of making dates. But on the other hand, when we implemented our landlord portal, we felt that we weren't ready. We found some problems, and we moved the date. It was the right thing to do because it was going to have a negative impact on those landlords that were going to use that portal. So our optimization point for success is how do we provide more functionality, more transparency? How do we increase our efficiency and effectiveness without impacting the citizen? The citizen should not know that we're making a change. If they do, then there's something that we probably didn't do correctly.
Tell us how you get buy-in from some of the higher-ups, from senior management, on some of the projects that you want to implement, some of the big changes that you want to make within the system.
That has not been, I have not had to work at that, is the honest answer to your question. My peers and the first deputy commissioner and the commissioner are waiting on me to do more. We have a backlog of projects. We have multiple case management issues. You can imagine people calling us to maybe register a complaint. That becomes a case. And I have a backlog of case management projects that I need to go do. So I had not had to go get buy-in to do IT projects. I had in my past lives, I had to develop that skill. How do I convince the CFO to do this? I'm here to tell you that that particular skill that I was pretty good at is getting stale because I don't have to do it anymore. I'm going to have to go practice.
So there's a lot of projects, obviously, and a lot of technology, a lot of new changes that you're pushing out to the citizens, which are beneficial. But what process do you use to try to figure out what it is that the citizens of the city might need in terms of technology?
I leverage and I listen to the deputy commissioners. I listen to my peers. I recognize that I've been in this organization for a year, and I don't know what I don't know about the citizens and the pain that they go through and the issues that they have. So I'm very careful to listen very intently and react very carefully to the deputy commissioners who have been supporting the Department of Finance or have been in public sector for decades. And they have, to my earlier point, trust your instincts. Right? I don't have instincts to tell me how the citizens are going to react. I don't. But I have instincts that tell me that I can recognize who does. And I listen for the tone change of their voice when they're concerned about something, and the tenor of how they speak about a specific problem. Because I need to react to what they know this problem. So I need to know that I don't know and they know, and I need to listen to them. And I'm very careful to do that and to seek out people within the organization that I get a sense that they have their hand on the pulse of what the citizens are doing, and we need to make sure from an IT perspective we listen to them because we need to react to them. Because we in IT have been sitting back and we may not know how the citizens are going to react. I certainly don't.
Tell us what you hope that other CIOs who might have done the same switch you have from private to public sector might learn from you from your first year of experience so far here.
So what I would say to other CIOs would be that the private sector has got a set of problems that technology has to and will fix. And that we need to apply our skills to the public sector. And in the private sector, we've applied our skills and our ability to be able to improve a supply chain on a retail business. We've applied and improved how we manage money in a financial business. We've applied and improved how we mine data for an insurance company. Those things are not yet done in the public sector. And we need to apply our skills to be able to bring that sector to be able to embrace technology, to leverage technology, to do the things that we're doing in private sector. And my message would be is that what I found is open, receptive, listening executives who want to be able to leverage what we've done in private sector relative to change management, organizational change, workflow, right? People are ready. It's time to begin to apply that so that we can improve how we serve the citizens of the city, the state, the federal government.
Seb, thank you so much. This was great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time on SarderTV.